when I speak about this issue, because I'm very fascinated by this issue, just because I think that the implications, the consequences, whether they're positive or negative, they have the potential to be very vast. Like I was just writing today about this topic, actually, just saying that I'm going to be recording this podcast, and I think the words I used was, it has the potential to change the fabric of society and culture, and so we really better get it right. And my worry is that if we get it wrong, it's young people that pay the price. And it really worries me. I'm not sure how much this is happening, because it is kind of mainstream narratives that I'm getting, that some of this information I'm getting is coming from. But children perhaps not needing parental consent to have possibly irreversible surgeries, possibly giving puberty blockers when they're under 18. That worries me. And it also worries me what you were saying there about people who detransition or people who regret the decision. People don't like to talk about that. They don't like to admit that there might be people that regret it, because that just goes against their sort of narrative. But we don't have the long-term studies for this sort of thing. For people who do regret it, you're not going to see that for a long time, because I just feel like it's growing so exponentially right now, and we're kind of rushing into all of this, especially policy-wise. And I fear that it's young people that are going to pay the possible negative price of that.
Yeah, and it's not just the exponential growth that concerns me. I mean, that it does concern me, but more so it's the presentation of those people that are showing up that has changed. I mean, there's a lot of question marks about the nature of those people, because there probably is some growth, some natural growth from destigmatizing it,
Yeah.
and it's in the media and people are aware of it. So I mean, like me, for example, it was very clear to everyone around me that something was going on for me from a very early age, but I never was taken to a gender clinic as a kid. So there probably were a lot of kids like me that were experiencing it. Nobody knew what it was. Trans wasn't on our radar. I had never even heard of anyone I grew up in a little farming town. I never even heard of anyone transitioning. So there probably are more of kids like me being taken to clinics at an earlier age. So I buy that to a certain extent, but I don't buy that is the reason for that 4,000% increase. And what's different about this new cohort? Two things. Well, actually, three things. So one is the sex ratio is completely flipped. Now, if you go back to what I was saying about the three pathways to gender dysphoria that are currently in the DSM-5, of those three pathways, about 80% of those are going to be males, natal males, because autogynephilia pretty much only happens to males. Um, the homosexual subtype, there are far more gay men than there are gay women. And then among gay women, there are far fewer butch lesbians. And historically, it was only butch lesbians that were transitioning. So you've got, and they say that autogynephilia, that subtype, is the vast majority of trans women that were transitioning. So before we understood trans, and this was all a popular media darling, people who worked at gender clinics, they saw two types of people coming to the clinics. They saw mostly middle-aged men who had lived heterosexual lives. They were often married, had kids, often in the military. So that's mostly who was coming to clinics. And then when pediatric clinics opened up, they were seeing some kids, but most of those kids grew up to be gay or lesbians. So it was mostly heterosexual men transitioning. That was about 80%. The second largest group would have been the very highly effeminate gay men who had gender dysphoria. So they would have been like this very effeminate boys, and this insistence that they were girls, and so they were transitioning. And then a few butch lesbians, and then a handful of people with disorders of sex development. So if you think of about 80% of people who experience gender dysphoria are males, it doesn't make sense. Like having all these girls with no childhood history of extreme gender nonconforming behavior or expressing, I think a mistake is made. These girls in adolescence announcing that they're trans, we've never seen that before, and it doesn't map onto our understanding of what gender dysphoria is, because those girls, if they were same-sex attracted, we would have seen some evidence of that in their childhood. So that the type of gender dysphoria that emerges in adolescence or later in life was usually the autogynephilic type of males. So the sex ratio reversal doesn't make sense.
Mhm.
And, unless there's a type of gender dysphoria or a pathway to gender dysphoria that we just don't yet understand. But let's take our time to understand it. So I'm not saying that those girls maybe they do have a legitimate type of gender dysphoria, but we don't understand it yet. So that doesn't seem like the time to be opening up the doors wide open, saying, well, we're not going to assess you or understand you, because it's a completely new cohort of people that we're seeing at clinics.
Mhm.